this webinar too. So it'll be available to anyone who attended or registered after the event. All right, ready to get started, Heidi?
Sure.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Jessica Fialkovich, and for those who don't know me, I'm the president and CEO of Transworld Business Advisors of Colorado. We're a business brokerage firm. And today I'm excited to have my good friend, mentor, and overall amazing entrepreneur, Heidi Ganahl, with me. Heidi was the founder of Camp Bow Wow and ran that business and grew it to the largest pet care franchise in the world. She's also recently started She Factor, which she's going to talk about a little bit, which is an amazing network for women to connect and try and find their purpose in life. She's also an elected official at the University of Colorado Board of Regents. Most people don't know that board is like a board of directors, but it's an elected position. So she ran for office in 2016 and absolutely killed it. She gives back, and she's super passionate about small business and an advocate for small businesses in the community. So Heidi, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, good morning, Jess. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, so I've got some questions for you first, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. But I gave the quick, brief introduction, but why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself, what you've done, and also what you're excited about right now?
Sure. Well, I am an entrepreneur at heart, but I started out in pharmaceutical sales after college. I went to CU Boulder, and they got my master's from DU in healthcare administration. But I was the kid that was always opening the lemonade stand and doing the dog walking service. And I didn't know that was called entrepreneurship back then, but very creative. And I went into pharmaceutical sales. It was a good job, but I called it the golden handcuffs. Like, it was such a good job that you couldn't leave it. It was silly to leave it, but it was boring. Like, I didn't have an outlet for my creativity. Delivered a lot of samples and did a lot of catering for the doctor's offices, but really it wasn't my sweet spot. And my first husband and I would write up business plans all the time, mostly at restaurants on the back of napkins over a beer. And at about that same time, we were traveling a lot and in our early 20s, and had these two dogs, Mick and Winnie, that were big, just mutts from the shelter. And they needed a place to go while we were traveling, and couldn't find a decent place anywhere. Back then, the kennels, the old style kennels, were like the chain link with the runs, concrete, dark, icky. And if you wanted a house sitter, it was the neighborhood kid, and he would come for 20 minutes a day, and that was it. So right next door to my dad's business, about that time, opened up one of the first doggy daycares in the whole Western United States, called Doggy Day Camp. And Brian and I thought that was the coolest thing since sliced bread. We would go and hang out and watch it, avoid doing work. And we bugged Deb all the time, like, can we open one of these? She's like, go for it if you can. So we wrote up the business plan. And I mean, we had no money. We were maxed out on student loan debt. I don't know where we thought we were going to get the resources to do it. But we started talking to landlords. They thought we were nuts, like having 100 dogs in a building playing together. And so about that time, Brian was just finishing up college, and I was still in pharmaceutical sales. Our family gave him a gift to go up in an old Stearman plane, like a Navy fighter plane, and do the stunts. And the plane crashed and killed the pilot, who was a good family friend, and Brian. And my life changed dramatically at that point. I put the business plan away, and I ended up getting $1 million settlement from the plane crash, and did everything wrong that you're not supposed to do with the money. Loaned it to family and friends, started a couple other little businesses that weren't the right fit for me because everyone said doggy daycare was crazy, so I didn't do that one. And ended up 5 years after the fact, my little brother comes to me, and I've got 83 grand left of the $1 million settlement. I'm a single mom at this point because I had remarried and quickly divorced, but had a beautiful daughter out of the deal, Tori, and was just lost. I was just so lost. And my brother's like, let's start Camp Bow Wow. Let's figure out how to do it. And I was like, are you nuts? Like, I'm not going to take my last bit of money and start a doggy daycare. But we did. And Patrick managed the day-to-day, and I did all the marketing and the finances and everything, and kept my job, and dragged Tori to the dog park. Or they didn't have dog parks back then. It was Wash Park or Platt Park, to go hand out milk bones and free camp coupons, and ended up taking off. And we had the first one off Broadway and I-25 near Herman's Hideaway, opened a second one up in Broomfield, then started franchising a couple years later. And it grew really fast. until 2008, which we'll talk about in a little bit, when things came to a screeching halt, which I'm having deja vu right now. And it was a wonderful ride, and we grew it to a $100 million brand. I think now they have 170 locations, but I sold it in late 2014 to VCA, the big veterinary chain. And then they sold VCA and Campbell to Mars, the chocolate company, who also owns Banfield, the PetSmart vet clinics. So it was quite a journey, and had a ball, had a great team, and lots of ups and downs. My God, so many stories of, things you shouldn't do and should do when you're starting a business, launching a business, growing a business. But I'm very blessed to have kind of lived the American dream and had the exit. And now I get to give back, and I've started She Factor, which I'll tell you about in a little bit too.
I love hearing that story. Every time I hear it, Heidi, it's so inspiring. And I know you talk about overcoming adversity a lot, and there's a lot of lessons in there that I've heard you speak about. Talk a little bit about, so, I think as small business owners, a lot of this is like the emotion and the mental capacity. So talk about like what kind of mental space were you in pre-2008, and like when the market started going down, like September, October 2008, like how did that transition, and what was the transition like for you?
Oh my gosh, I remember it so clearly. I mean, things were growing like crazy at Camp Bawa. We were selling 5 or 6 franchises a month, and we were trying to get everybody open. But it was just chaos, but a beautiful chaos, traveling all over the country, doing zoning meetings, just doing whatever we could to get camps open. And I remember the call that I got in January of 2008 from one of the franchisees saying, I lost my financing through Comerica. I'm like, what do you mean you lost your financing? He said, well, they reneged on the loan. I'm like, why? I said, I don't know. And I started getting more and more calls. Well, come to find out, Comerica backed out of franchising or funding our franchise tier, they called it.
Mm-hmm.
They were still doing Burger King and McDonald's, but we were a smaller, fast growing franchise. And the other thing that happened was we were working on getting some capital infused, and the deal was almost done. And it was with a big investment banker in New York. And we were going to bring in about $3 million. And they called and said, we're not doing it. Like 2 days before it was supposed to close after working on it for 6 months. I'm like, what? The economy's great. Everything's going fantastic. And they said, there's something going on in the consumer market. We're not comfortable. They pulled it. So those 2 things were signals to me. And funny enough, we went to Mexico. We go on a timeshare trip every January. And we were down in Cabo. And the little guy that works at the resort around the pool that brings around your drinks and everything said, oh, America's going to go through hard times. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, we can tell from the tourism when things slow down, when a recession's going to hit. And this was in like beginning of February. He's telling us this. And Jason and I are like, no, that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. And then we came back. And of course, over the next, 6 months, the market crashed in September. But even before that, things started drying up as far as financing. It was terrifying. We didn't know if people were still going to spend money on doggy daycare. We didn't know how people could get financing to get open. We had about 40 franchisees who had signed the franchise agreement, paid the franchise fee, and didn't then have the money, the big loan to open. So we had to get very creative. And it's now a business case at the Leeds School of Business at CU Boulder, how we managed it. It's an ethics case because it was so tricky navigating that. So I can talk more about that if that's interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting because like a lot of people are comparing what's going on to 2008 right now, but the sharper drop actually reminds me a lot more of 9/11. There's still lessons we can take out of 2008. So you're sitting there, you're a leader of this organization, you own your own locations, you own you manage multi-franchisees all over the US. How do you handle the situation as a leader? Like what kind of tone do you set? And, how do you communicate that tone across to employees, for you franchisees? Like, what was your leadership strategy during that time?
Well, I think it goes back to relationships with your customers or your franchisees or your employees. If you have strong relationships and they trust you to lead and make quick decisions, big decisions about the business, then it's much easier. So that's a lesson for right now. After we get through this, it's all about building relationships and trust with the people that help you run the business. But a lot of it was instinctual. I mean, you just had to make decisions so quickly about, loans, about opening, about real estate, about employees. I remember I was part of Vistage, which I know you're heading up EO. Lean on those groups. My goodness, this is what they're built for. And I remember my Vistage meeting shortly after everything started happening in January, and they had a hard talk with me. I was the only woman in the group, 11 guys and me, and they were like my big brothers. They're like, Heidi, you have to lay off a quarter of your team right now. I'm like, no, I can't do that. They're like, if you want to survive, you have to do it now, not in 3 months, 6 months, you have to do it now. And so I did. It was terrible. So making decisions like that and trusting the people around you, your mentors, and trusting your gut and having a good relationship and knowing when to rip the Band-Aid and when not to. I think we're in a different situation right now, hopefully, because I think the recovery will be bold and strong after we get through this. But we've got to weather the storm, and no one knows how long the storm is. And that's the most frustrating part of this. Is it 1 month? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? They're talking about another cycle in the fall. So it's really scary, but you've got to just believe that in yourself as a leader and believe that you know what's right for your business, and listen to your customers. Listen to what they need right now. We've had to do that with SheFactor. We've turned it on its head in the last 3 weeks, going from running live events all over the country to now having to do virtual events and figure this out. And how do we get sponsors right now? I was telling you earlier, like, is it okay to call people and ask them to sponsor an event right now? I don't know.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff in there. I think some good lessons for the listeners on the call is, quick decisions. And I know it's really hard because there's a lot of information out there, but I think part of being a leader is sometimes you have to make a quick decision with the information you have. So not waiting until you have every single bit of information. Like we were just talking about the bill that just passed the Senate and we're waiting for it to pass the House. There's a lot of questions in that bill. And as a leader and an owner of a company, you can't necessarily wait for the government to give you all those answers or to make it super clear. You have to make decisions on your business. You did bring up Vistage and EO, and I want to talk about that. So Vistage and Entrepreneurs Organization are masterminds for small business owners. There's others in the community too. I know we have a few on the call from Denver Boss Babes, which is a great community on Facebook. And there's others ones too, but surrounding yourself with like-minded people going through this, I feel like a lot. And Heidi, I don't know if you felt like that, but during these times, especially, I feel like I'm on stage in front of my clients and also my team. And you really have to have that courage and the positivity. And you can't really lose it in front of everybody right now because you're their support system. So to have that, those friends and that mastermind that you can kind of break down and say, this is really, really hard is important through this time.
I agree.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about more listening to your customers, because my next question is about, what was some of the priorities that you focused on, both with Camp Bow Wow and now with SheFactor? I know you've listened to your customers in the past and pivoted the businesses in order to serve them.
Yeah, I think it's going back to blocking and tackling. With Camp Bow Wow, it was, okay, we're not going to be able to sell right now, and we're probably not going to be able to open a lot of new ones. So let's take care of the franchises that we have open and help them weather this storm. And let's look at their basic financials and make sure that they're doing all the right things to market their business in this and to manage their cash flow, because that was a huge issue for us and for our franchisees, especially when you don't know what's going to happen with revenue. My husband owns a couple restaurants, as you know, Jess, and the hardest thing right now is that they're giving relief to the workers, rightly so, we should be, and they're shutting down the dining rooms, but there's still rent due, these huge rents, and there's fixed expenses like utilities and other things that they have to pay. And so you're just bleeding money. And so, knowing that you have enough cash to survive something like this, I think is a lesson that's going to come out of this on the other end. Knowing that you need 3 to 6 months of cash available or a line of credit, something to get you by. And loans aren't necessarily always the answer, because if you come out the other side with a lot of debt and bigger loan payments, it may tank your business over the long term instead of the short term.
Yeah. It's a great point. The first day after everything came out that we were, starting to shut down some businesses in Colorado, the first thing I did, got up at 6 a.m., sat down with my husband, who's my business partner, and we shaved every expense we could. Because I think in this, that you're totally right. The name of the game in this situation, especially when there's some businesses that went to zero in revenue, is cash flow, and managing cash flow every single day and projecting how much cash you have left to survive. I think a big learning lesson is, managing cash flow 3 to 6 months is the thing I've learned too in the past. And I don't think any of us thought there would be a situation where our revenue would go to zero, right? With some of these businesses, like we thought like, oh yeah, it might slow down, but there's never in these projections like, oh, well, it could be zero at some point. And that's put a lot more stress on businesses. And I understand where they're coming from. But I also liked what you said, how you take care of your customers. And I think I was talking to my team recently about this, and it's interesting because some of this time's almost been a blessing. We've been moving so fast for so long as an economy that calming down and reaching out to your customers and seeing how they're handling this. Some of our customers, we work in a B2B environment, so some of our customers are losing their businesses. Some of your customers, if you're in B2C, may be losing their jobs. So just reaching out and extending that relationship could actually be a positive in the long run, right?
I think so. And I remember when this all went down with Camp Bow Wow, we did yappy hours in the lobby. So we would just go set up a table with wine and cheese and crackers and then treats for the dogs, of course. And I would go there during the busiest pickup times and drop off times. And I'd just hang out in the lobby, and I would encourage each franchise owner to do this and just say, hi, how's it going? Are you hanging in there? Is there anything we can do better? And that's how we ended up developing Home Buddies, which was in-home pet care, and Behavior Buddies, our dog training program, just from being in those lobbies and listening and asking, what more can we do for you? And that's where we're at with She Factor right now, is what more can we do for you? Like, we know we can't do the live chapter events with the speakers and all that good stuff. So how can we help you? How can we get you through this time? And what we heard was the girls just want community. They want to see they want to see other people. They want laughter. They want lightheartedness. They don't want gloom and doom. They get enough of that on the news and in their day to day. And they also want to be able to talk through like how you get through this stuff. Like, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to lose my job. What should I do? Or I'm getting put on, furlough for 3 months. Or, oh my gosh, I'm a nurse and I'm working 24 hours a day right now in the ER and I'm scared. How do I deal with this? So just having people to talk to, whether it's online or on the phone, I think it's so critical right now to keep that face-to-face going throughout this. And boy, aren't we all getting good at the Zoom technology and Google Teams. And I think it'll really help us be more efficient on the other end too.
Yeah, exactly. You're still getting FaceTime. It's just through a screen, right? So let's spin into the positive. So what was the ultimate outcome for Camp Bow Wow and for yourself after 2008? Like, where did you guys end up? And like, what were some of the blessings that 2008 brought that you weren't aware of?
Well, I think we came out much more efficient and much more solid as far as a business, because we did trim all the expenses and got really lean and focused on our blocking and tackling, whether it was the corporate side, the franchisor side, or the franchisee side. We helped our franchisees do that. And we came out just, wowza, after everything started to recover. And when we sold franchises at that point, we had a much better understanding of our business model and, income potential, et cetera. So I was not ready to sell right after the recession. I was exhausted. Like in 2010, 11, I was tired, but I stuck with it. I ended up getting remarried and having a baby, and I had a teenager. And then Jason and I tried for another one, and we got twins. So in 2012, I had the twins. And so I had 3 kids under the age of 3, and Camp Bow Wow was starting to grow again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do all this. So that's when I started thinking about either bringing in a strategic partner or selling the business. And better than anybody, that takes a year or 2 to get through that and, get everything set up and get through the process. So we did, and we ended up landing with VCA, and it was a great experience actually. And I was able to stay on as CEO for a while and not work quite as hard, not travel quite as much with the kids, and then phase out in like 2015, late or 16 when I ran for office.
Yeah. So, something like 2008 allows you to get leaner and better understanding of your business model, and whether it's a giant exit that's in your future or just a more profitable business and something that you enjoy more. The other side, this is I hear a lot of speakers talk about like, look, we don't have an economy that always goes up. There's cycles, and you already brought it up, Heidi. And I think the best leaders and the best business owners know how to survive, and not just survive, but thrive in any cycle and use each cycle to their advantage. So down markets have a ton of advantage. And I think we're going to learn some of those really quickly. So let's talk about the current environment. We've mentioned it a little bit. It's very uncertain right now. We have no idea, but a lot of things I've heard is like focus on what you can control. So what are you seeing as a business owner yourself and talking to other business owners? What are some things business owners can do right now that they can control?
I think you hit on the key one is cut any excess expenses. I mean, you've got to hold on to every dollar that you have for dear life. And you've really got to evaluate and make some tough decisions around staffing and who you can keep on board, who you can move to part-time or contract. You know, it's all about survival right now. It's truly all about being efficient and listening to your customer and adapting and innovating if you need to, like with She Factor, figuring out how to run virtual events instead of doing live events. Or if you're a restaurant, how to really take off on takeout and delivery and how to market that way. So it's all about innovation. It's about preserving cash, and it's about listening to your customer every single day because things are changing so fast. And then as far as the regulation, I think being part of a group like EO or Vistage, or I'm the chair of the board of Job Creators Network, which is a really cool organization started by Bernie Marcus, the founder of Home Depot. And we're all about helping job creators. We're like the Small Business Chamber of Commerce, and we advocate like crazy in DC. We've been working on this bill. We helped do the tax cuts bill. So getting involved with an organization like that so you can stay on the front lines of what's happening with legislation, because there may be some things that can help you there or hurt you there. And you have to use your voice. I've learned that as a elected official now. We listen. Like when you guys email us and call us, we listen, and it makes a big impact. Even 100 phone calls to a senator or a congressman can shift a bill. So don't be shy about that. It's really important right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know actually parts of the stuff that the CARES Act included that Marco Rubio introduced, or conversations you and I had, I'd like to think that that was our ideas, but it was probably the voices from a lot of small business owners. And I've been a big advocate for small business, and same thing, just email, call your local senators, call your federal senators and House. They might not always respond. I mean, they're getting bombarded with messages, but they do listen to them and they do read them. And also, when you're part of a group like EO or Vistage, or if you're part of a group like that, use your voice as an organization. There's also a ton of reporters out there right now that want to hear your story. I just did an interview with USA Today and Forbes, and I think allowing yourself to be vulnerable, even in the media, the elected officials also listen to the media, right? And we can shift the narrative, one of explaining what small businesses are going through right now, but also you can shift the narrative to be a little bit positive sometimes, and show some silver linings. And then I want to touch on another thing. Layoffs has been a big topic, and it's just so hard for everybody. But one thing I think you touched on, Heidi, is you can get really creative with layoffs, right? So we're all hoping this is a temporary position, but you have to survive as a business. So those jobs are there once this is all over for your staff. But you can take your staff to part-time, you can take them to contract. I had a really open conversation with my staff, and I said, look, I could cut 2 jobs, or I could cut everybody's salary 10% temporarily. Like, what do you guys want to do? And it's not always a democracy, right? But I wanted them to feel, the position that I was in as a leader, but also the position they put their fellow coworkers in, if we weren't all willing to take a little bit of a sacrifice together. So we decided to do the 10% temporary pay cuts across the board. And I think, if anything, it brought our team closer together and really solidified the culture. One speaker I've heard too says that times like this, really, this is the time either your culture solidifies and melds together even stronger, or it breaks.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. So Heidi, before we dive into questions from the audience, let's finish up. And you mentioned a couple things, but how do you think we can support each other as small business owners, as women-owned businesses? What do you think we should be focusing on in terms of community right now?
Well, I think I often tell people vote with your dollar. It's much easier and better to do it that way than deal with legislation and the government getting involved. But support the businesses that are trying to stay open and doing the right things, whether it's ordering takeout, delivery, ordering something on Amazon. Just really think about how you spend your money right now and where you spend it, and supporting people that way. Also, just put out a good word, like a text of, oh my gosh, I just got takeout from this restaurant. It was awesome. They delivered, whatever. And just communicate on social media and support the businesses that way. And then finally, you know, talk to, like, ask people what they need. We're a society that's so hesitant to ask for help. And if somebody, like a friend of mine last night texted and was just like, what can I do to help? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. She goes, it's not fine. Like, you have to give me something to do to help you right now. Cause I have 3 small kids I'm trying to figure out how to homeschool, and Jason's trying to keep his business alive, and I'm trying to keep my business alive. And it's not easy. But I'm not complaining. I'm very blessed with my friends that are healthcare workers on the front lines, and even the folks working at King Soopers, and, you know, all the different people on the front lines. I feel very blessed that I have the luxury to sit from home and try and figure this out. So I think it's just being in connection and community and asking for help when you need it. And you know what? Also admitting this isn't okay. It sucks sometimes. This is hard. This is hard stuff. And we're human beings, and it's so hard to watch people getting sick and hurting, and watching their businesses being hurt. So I think we don't always have to put on a happy face.
It's so true. It's so true. So we'd like to open it up to the audience right now for Q&A. So in the footer of the Zoom screen, you'll see a button that says Q&A in there. And if you just pop open that screen, you can submit your question and we can answer that live. While you guys are doing that and submitting some questions, I do have some that were submitted to us earlier. So we'll get started with those first. But the first question comes from Sonia. And Sonia asks, Heidi, why did you choose to franchise Camp Bow Wow?
That's a great question, and one that I think is still relevant today. I'm a very visionary person. I like to build brands. I'm not necessarily your day-to-day operations gal, but I can definitely lead an operations team and provide the guidance and the leadership there. But franchising allows you to help other people start their own business doing what they love, and supporting them in doing so, while you get to create the big brand and kind of the overarching business. And so for me, I didn't have a lot of cash to keep building corporate units, and I also loved that part of the business. So the franchise model worked beautifully for me, and my leadership style, and kind of my sweet spot of working on the big visionary stuff instead of the day-to-day. So those 2 reasons. I didn't have a lot of capital to grow it through corporate locations. And number 2, it fit my leadership style around the visionary stuff versus the, day-to-day.
Great. So our next question is, what industry would you start a business or invest in today, considering the very recent situation?
Oh my goodness, there's so much opportunity right now. And that's the key thing to keep in mind when things like this happen. Opportunity is everywhere, and you can look around and see problems to solve all over the place right now. And that's really what entrepreneurship is about, is solving problems and providing a value to someone in exchange for a value back, and, money or whatever. But I think, technology is obviously a big one. I think, technology is obviously the number one. What do you think, Jess? Like, what are some?
Yeah, I actually, because I see with us buying and selling businesses, I see opportunity everywhere. But one big trend that I talk about that started to happen, I think will accelerate after this situation, is that baby boomers own about 50% of all small businesses. And they're starting to retire, but they're more concentrated in certain industries than others. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity in what I call like the stable industries. And a lot of them are blue collar. It's like things like construction and plumbing and roofing, and the services that no matter what the economy, no matter what we are, there's no robots that are ever going to build a house, things like that. So I look at those, and I look at the industries that are very baby boomer heavy right now. And I see a lot of opportunity, one, because those industries also tend to be a little bit more antiquated. So to your point, bringing some technology and some new service solutions in. And there's also opportunity to grow either by acquiring of competitors down the road, or knowing that your competitors are just retiring in the next, 5 to 10 years. So you could accelerate your growth a lot through there. So I don't think it's like a specific industry, but there are industries that are more solid, I'd say, in the baby boomer sector. And a lot of those are blue collar, but there's other ones as well. I mean, actually medical, a lot of medical practices, dental practices, and obviously you have to have the degrees for that and the experience, but those are very baby boomer centric too. So
I think there's two other industries that occurred to me are going to, I mean, there's going to be an explosion of innovation. One is education, because of this, having to homeschool our kids. We're seeing what it's like, and oh my goodness, I have so much empathy for teachers. It's so hard. But just the way we learn, and we already kind of knew that at CU, like University of Colorado, we've been working on adaptive learning and experiential learning, and how do you break down these norms of having to go to classroom every day and make it more fun and engaging. So I think that's going to accelerate at lightning speed. And then healthcare, I think it's been fascinating to watch all these regulations fall off, and how quickly companies and people can innovate when they aren't handcuffed by a lot of the regulations. Now, I know there's definitely a place for regulations in healthcare, but if you can create a vaccination in 30 days instead of 3 years, and it saves a tremendous amount of lives, there is risk there with speeding it up, but there's going to be an incredible amount of opportunity in healthcare, and figuring out how to deliver healthcare differently and deliver education differently. So those are going to be two really exciting areas, I think.
Yeah. So we just gave you a bunch of industries that we think, but I think the overarching is, really at a turning point in the economy because of the severe drop in business right now, but also because of the generational changes. So there's going to be a lot. So the next one's about the CARES Act. So the CARES Act is coming out and offering loan forgiveness if you don't lay off or cut salaries. What are your thoughts on taking immediate action, layoffs or salary cuts, versus pursuing the payroll protection program? And I mean, Heidi, if you want to jump in and answer some of this, I can provide some background on it too.
Yeah, I think Jess, you and I have been advocating for this, this idea that go ahead and offer more loans for small businesses, but convert them to grants if they keep the employees and cover payroll. And because that creates the solution that you don't have this big loan waiting for you at the other end if you take the risk of keeping your staff on and paying them. So you and I have been working hard to get them to include that and be a part of that conversation. But then you get to the actual process of applying for it. And I went on a couple nights ago to try and apply for the SB just to see what it was like. I'm not necessarily going to apply, but it was overwhelming and difficult, and the website was junky, and it was hard to get through. And I didn't get through it. I put it aside, and it's still sitting there. So I hope that the same thing doesn't happen with this new approach, and that it doesn't take months to get through the dollars into the pockets, because businesses don't have months to wait right now.
No. And I think the key with this program, and it's hard, this is a hard decision, because if it does take months, I wouldn't want to see a business deplete their cash trying to keep their payroll at the rate it is by in hope of this payroll protection program. So there's the CARES bill, and we were just talking about this before we started the call. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and there's a provision in the CARES bill that basically says the SBA has 15 days after the bill is passed to figure it out. And one key thing they're trying to figure out is who delivers the loans. Right now, as it's written, the lenders, so banks, deliver the loans. So all SBA loans, as they are today, before this happened, they're actually delivered through banks. So the banks still make that ultimate decision. They're the ones funding the loans, and the SBA is a guarantee program. So they'll guarantee, traditionally it was 75% of the loan. So if a borrower defaulted on the loan, the federal government would provide that 75 guarantee back to the bank. With these new loans, they've increased those guarantees to 90 to 100%. And with the payroll protection program, they're looking to use the lenders to deliver that, which is great because lenders typically will be able to close a loan very quickly. Now the SBA disaster loans, they're still looking, and it's been directly through the government the last couple of weeks. And as we've seen, the website's crashed. It's kind of a mess. And in the past, the government's delivered those loans. So like when we had Katrina and things like that, the government's delivered those disaster loans directly. And the average after Katrina, and we have to remember that was only a few states filing, was 5 to 6 months to receive the funds for the loans. So the key thing we have to watch once the bill passes and see if the House makes any changes to it, the key question we have to figure out is who is delivering the loans. If it's the payroll loans are going through the banks, then I'd say, it is worth the risk to keep your employees. The other thing that I would say is how I read the bill is the grant, if you reduce your employees over last year, the grant is reduced proportional to that. So it's not a use it or lose it type thing. It's not like, hey, if you lay one person off, it doesn't convert to a grant. It converts at that percentage. So that hopefully that helps too. And I know it's a long road still that we have to get through. We're also doing, Transworld's doing a panel of bankers next Wednesday morning. And we're hoping we have more answers about the CARES Act at that time. All right.
It's still not too late for people to weigh in. They haven't voted on it yet, I don't think, or they're voting on it.
I haven't seen it.
Call your representatives and tell them to support the act if you do. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff in there that, typical politics, they loaded it up the bill. But right now, I think if you're an entrepreneur, a small business owner, and you need that relief, you got to speak up and call, and don't email, call, like pick up the phone, and you'll leave a message typically, but they write down every yay or nay for a bill and put it right in front of the congressman right before they vote. So it's important.
Yeah, and call their DC offices because they're all in DC right now.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Heidi, next question. Do you recommend any books or templates when starting a business?
So you and I talked a little bit earlier about E-Myth. I think that's still a fantastic book. I also like Patrick Lencioni, his stuff. I also love listening to just general motivational speakers. Like I love Sarah Blakely. She's one of my favorite entrepreneurs, and she's just real. I mean, she has 5 kids, little kids. She started Spanx, and if you follow her on Instagram and her stories, she's just real and takes you through the journey of being an entrepreneur and a business person. But as far as tactical, how to start a business, I think the best thing to do is build a team around yourself of mentors who have done it before, who can see your blind spots and watch for, missteps, and also encourage you when things get really tough. So it's She Factor, we call it your SEAL Team 6. And it's really people that will be authentic with you, real, that have different skill sets. We also have in She Factor kind of an assessment you can do, which is called your silhouette. You could do it through an anagram, you could do it through strength finders, but really understanding your sweet spot or your strengths so that you can build a team of advisors that have other strengths that complement you. I think that's way more important than buying some software online or joining an online entrepreneur startup group. That's important too, but I think really having a live team of people who know you and have been around the block is the best way to do that.
Yeah, I agree. So one of my friends told me once that life is too short to make all the mistakes yourself, and you could spin it more positive, right? But same thing is, use other people around you to learn what they've been through. All right, the next question, I think this is a good one for you, Heidi, because you're super passionate about this. So we have an international caller on the line, and they're looking to buy and consolidate small businesses in the US. They're currently in the UK. Why do you think this person should choose Colorado over other states?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I like to call Colorado the Wild, Wild West. We just have a spirit about us that's tenacious, it's passionate, it's fun, it's playful, and we're super creative. We're not afraid to fail. Like there's just a spirit about the people in Colorado. And I hope that the current legislature and leadership in Colorado doesn't squash that. I see more and more regulation coming down the pipe in our state. And it breaks my heart, honestly, because I know that the spirit of Colorado is all about innovation, startups, taking risks, and going out there and knocking it out of the park. And nothing will squash that more than an unelected bureaucrat with Camp Bow Wow. I always tell the story of we were growing really fast, and the Department of Agriculture came in and said, you can only have 1 person in the play arts for every 15 dogs. And I said, what? We use 1 to 25, and it's super safe. We know how to do this. nope, we know better. And I'm like, well, how do you know better? Well, we've just done a lot of studies and we've looked at other units, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So they put this rule in place, and it would reduce the profitability at our Colorado franchises by about 20% by that one regulation. Wow. And that's one of the reasons I'm very involved with Job Creators Network is there are things that politicians and legislators and bureaucrats can do that can kill small businesses and entrepreneurs. And there are things that they can do to help open up the doors and keep things growing and innovating and alive and well. And that's kind of what Colorado's been known for in the past. I hope we keep it that way.
Yeah, I think we will too. I'd add to that, the community in Colorado is very powerful. I'm originally from New Jersey. I've been here for about 12 years, and the East Coast definitely taught me how to work hard and be tough, right? But the community that you have of small business owners and entrepreneurs in Colorado is really next to none. The support that we all give each other, and I think that's caused us to be able to lift each other up as a group versus it being a very competitive environment.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So last closing question, if you have to sum up everything in, one small piece, bit-sized piece of advice of how to get through the next month, 2 months, hopefully it's not longer than that, what would you tell everybody?
I tell everyone, put away the perfect. Things do not have to be perfect right now. It's survival mode. It's gut it out. It's save every dollar, hold on to every dollar for dear life, and listen to your customers, pay attention to what's happening politically and in your markets, and ask for help when you need it, and surround yourself with people who can help you.
Well, Heidi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know I do have some additional questions from Heidi that I'm going to forward to her. If anyone else has additional questions, you can send them to me. My email address is jessica@tworld.com. And we're going to send out a recording of this after to all attendees. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And Heidi, thank you so much, especially for sharing all of the advice.
Thanks for doing this, Jess. You're fantastic at running these. So it offers so much value for folks.